Talent, by and large, is a word that we throw around whenever we are looking into something wondrous. We use it to refer to a remarkable chef coming up with new cuisine, or a violinist who brings us close to tears with a beautiful song. We use it often, as humans in general, to speak about artistic things. How many times have you heard in regards to some artist in your class growing up, "Wow, she's so talented"? How often have you uttered those very words yourself? Talent exists. We have the word for a reason, and to my mind, and based on its definition, it has a place. However, it does seem that we use the word to describe several different things, and people who tend toward the artistic tend to view it differently than the greater populace. So let's start there. What do I mean by talent? From our dear friend Merriam-Webster, talent can be defined as a special, often athletic, creative, or artistic aptitude. In addition, the natural endowments of a person. I have not included all the definitions here just for transparency's sake, but these two specifically come to mind when the greater populace uses the words. Talent is the natural, universal, or God-given, depending on your perspective, abilities and aptitudes of a person. Now juxtapose this with the definition of skill, also taken from Merriam-Webster. The ability to use one's knowledge effectively and readily in execution or performance. Second, dexterity or coordination, especially in the execution of learned physical tasks. And third, a learned power of doing something competently, a developed aptitude or ability. Fairly different things by nature, it would seem. Though the academic and sometimes archaic meanings of things do not always hold in modern society, I feel as if these two do, and that we require the distinction in order to move forward. And about moving forward, I want to quickly come to the point of all of this. Why does this matter? Why is there significance in the distinction between talent and skill? It can keep you from engaging in something wonderful. If you naturally believe that artistic ability and creative things in general are dictated by natural-born talent, then what is the point of trying? What is the point of working toward proficiency if the universe has already inhibited you from that realm? If you believe this at a fundamental level, that you are not talented artistically, musically, culinarily, whatever it might be, that belief can keep you from even trying. Now, if you assume that that belief is true, which we often do with our own natural held beliefs, then it would be fruitless. It would be inefficient to try to do this thing, the skills of which you have not been graced with. That can keep you from trying lots of things. And if you hold that belief firmly, there's nothing that I can say or anyone can say that's going to change your mind. But if you allow yourself to examine it for a moment, to investigate the validity of the belief, if you take some time and invest into one of these things, get some adequate instruction, don't just throw yourself under the bus and say, "I can't do it," you will often find that that belief was probably a safety mechanism. It was something designed probably in your youth and maybe inherited from a parent who told you, "Oh, it's fine, we're just not good at math in this family." And you grew up thinking, "Oh, I'm just not talented when it comes to math, so I should expect myself to do poorly." That is an unfortunate thing that some people inherit from their parents, from other people in their lives. In times past, we were taught that, well, girls can't do these kinds of things because their brains are literally not the same size as men's brains, which is of course totally false. But for generations, there was a reason to believe that. And when you tell people, or you tell yourself that you can't do something for some reason, especially if you hearken back to it being part of your nature, a talent that you needed to come into this world with, it's really easy to just believe it, to never try. So if you believe that you have to have the talent in order to make art, and you don't have it, it's very, very hard to convince yourself that it's worth any amount of effort moving forward. And if this is you, if this is where you find yourself, or there's other people in your life who believe this, I would encourage you to take a risk. Risk wasting time, because that's all it's going to be. If you don't think you can draw at all, if you have told yourself a million times, I'm only able to copy things, I'm only able to draw, I can't paint, I'm only able to paint, I can't draw, I could never work with three-dimensional things, I can't handle perspective, I'm not good at math. Whatever lie, if I might be so bold, that you have told yourself, I would encourage you to waste time, to find some good instruction, to buckle down and focus on that thing. And I say find instruction because it's really easy, unfortunately, to be self-defeating. If you tell yourself and have your whole life that you can't even draw stick figures, and then you sit down to prove random internet person wrong by drawing bad stick figures for a day or two, you will have validated yourself. But if you go find a quick video somewhere on this platform, this amazing resource that we have for learning to draw people at a very, very basic level, total beginner, maybe even find a video that's for kids, even if you're, almost 40 like me. If you follow along with that and actually heed that instruction, give it maybe 5 to 10 hours of your time over the course of a month, you will improve. If you dedicate time to it, you will improve this skill. And I would bet that this is true for 97, 98% of you who are listening. Where do those numbers come from? Those numbers come from teaching over 1,000 students over 11 years in the public schools here in the US. Very, very seldom did I have a student who came to my classroom and was incapable of improving. It did happen, but it was incredibly, incredibly rare, and there were almost always unforeseen circumstances that plagued that particular situation. In almost every case, everyone came into that room with some idea about where they were on the talent scale. And I tried my best to dismantle it and just give them things that they could work on, things that they could progress on. And the second you know, psychologically, that you are capable of growing in a category, everything opens up. And that's the first thing that is damaging about conflating talent and skill, about not understanding that distinction, is it can keep you from engaging in the potential of something wonderful. If you are an artist, however, failing to understand the difference between the two can actually lead you to not appreciate your own growth. If you've been led to believe, either by your own natural thoughts or the words of others, that you are talented at drawing or painting or sculpting or anything, and that is why you are skillful, why you can do things, then that can be really demeaning concerning how much hard work and effort you've put into things. If you believe that you're able to draw only because you are talented, you've been born with this skill, then you cannot accept or take any credit for any of your accomplishments. This is something that was bestowed upon you, something that you had no control over. And therefore, it's just this thing that exists, this part of you. And I've seen this a lot with adults and with students over the years. You compliment someone on a piece of work and they just go, well, it's just what I do, or it's not that big a deal. A lot of that comes from just artists aren't particularly good at taking compliments because we are so harshly critical of ourselves, and there's some weird creative mind stuff that happens. We're just not good at taking compliments. So that's part of it. The other side is you have a tendency, if you believe that it's your talent that's gotten you where you are, to think like it's not that big a deal. I was just born with this gift, and so I'm doing this thing. And that is very, very seldom the case if you're older than like 10. Because if you were born with a lot of natural artistic talent and you never did anything artistic, it would just stagnate. It might not actually decay, which is where my brain goes, but it would certainly stagnate. It would be something that would just sit in a box somewhere, like a Christmas decoration that you only get out once a year and you use for just a little bit of time and you put back. Like, it doesn't necessarily break down, but it doesn't grow. It doesn't get any better. You don't get any more additional joy from it. It just sits there. And so that is what your artistic talent would be if it was never utilized. And therefore, like, if you are an artist who's been at this for a while, who's got some natural talent, who's developed some skills, you can take credit for the good things and the beautiful things that you produce because you've put time and effort into those things. And so that's another damaging thing that can come from believing that talent and skill are conflated, that they are the same thing, or that if you are artistic, it's just because you were born with that capacity. True, you might have been born with a little bit additional aptitude. You might have gotten a head start on things, but You can take credit for the amazing and beautiful and wonderful things that you do. And credit might not even be the best word. It's more like you can take pride in them in like the good old-fashioned way of taking pride in something, like being proud of yourself for what you've accomplished, because that's a big deal to finish a sketchbook, to finish a painting, to produce things of beauty that make human life better. Don't just assume that's because you were born this way and you have some talent or gift. Maybe you do, but it's okay to be happy and joyful because of the things that you produce. In this exact same train of thought, if you conflate the skill and talent, it's really easy to disregard the hard work of others. Now, if you are an artist listening to this, this probably doesn't happen, but it's one of those things that happens a lot in the non-creative communities, which is the people outside of the creative community is a better way to say that. And I ran into this constantly in the art world because I helped run the art and music departments of the school that I worked at. And frequently we would have a concert or an art show, and somebody, a parent, a community member would come up and would say, hey, this kid did so well, in their violin playing, like they're so talented. And I got so fed up with it that I would have this little gremlin in the back of my mind that was yelling like, don't you dare call it talent. Like, don't demean them. Don't diminish their hard work. This isn't talent. You have no idea how much time that kid puts into their instrument. Don't diminish it by calling it talent. And of course, most people are not trying to do that. But most people that haven't put a ridiculous amount of time into developing a skill don't, on an intrinsic level, understand how that functions. Like if you've learned to read, if you learned to drive a car, if you've learned any skill like that, how to play a sport, you've put time into learning a skill. You actually do understand what it's like. But most people that are outside of art and music don't seem to understand on a fundamental level, and that's fair because they're not in that world all the time, the fact that those are just skills too. Like, yes, there's some innovation and imagination and things that maybe are much harder to develop, or maybe some that can't even be developed. But a kid who gets up and proficiently draws a thing, especially in the middle or high school level, or proficiently plays or performs a song, that is a skill. That is something they have worked very hard to be able to do. Whether it came easily for them or not, it's something they worked very hard learning to do. And so it's something that is really common in our communities, especially here in the United States, for people just to throw out talent as a way, probably unintentionally, of diminishing the hard work that a person put into a thing. So again, if you're an artist, it's probably not something that you do to other people because you value the time that you put into your work. You understand how long it took to get that comic panel to look correctly. You understand how hard it is just to shade a cylinder and make it look correct. Like, you get good at those things and you can do it with your eyes closed. Maybe not if you're doing art things because that would be really awkward. You learn how to do those things as second nature, but you also remember learning it and remember practicing and how hard it was. If you've mastered any part of anatomy, think back to the gesture drawing, to learning all the muscle groups, to understanding how those things function. It's so much work. But that's another thing that can be kind of dangerous about conflating or misunderstanding skill and talent. Lastly, on this little front, it can keep you stuck if you believe that talent and skill are basically interchangeable when you have the ability to keep going forward. Now, what do I mean by this? If you believe that you are talented or talent is what dictates your skill with a thing, then it's really easy to just throw your hands up in defeat, to go, where I am now is where I'm capable of getting, and I can't go no further. On one hand, being okay with where you are artistically is a good thing because it keeps you content. It allows you to keep creating, which ironically allows you to improve. There is a lot to be said with finding solace and joy in whatever level you are when it comes to art. The counter to that is that if you believe that where you are now is the furthest you are capable of getting, you will unconsciously try to keep yourself there. And this is just human psychology. It's one of those unfortunate things. You almost need to choose to believe that you can be better than you really think you can, because that will actually set you up in a way where you will try to make that true. You will try to prove yourself right. We're very strange. I wish that humans were more predictable and understandable in how we function. And maybe we are, but not in the right ways. So it's really easy to hamstring yourself from improving if you think that talent is to blame for your skills. Because you can think, well, what I'm capable of doing now is as far as I can go. And I have been guilty of this for probably the vast majority of my life. I got proficient at drawing the things that I was proficient at drawing in high school. And I don't know really that I improved that much from like high school to probably my 30s, my early 30s. It wasn't until I started really delving into teaching art in a more effective manner. I taught for the first couple years after art school and was mostly just surviving, because that's what teaching is in your first 3 years. Once I had it down and started working myself away from teaching art history because it just wasn't my jam, I started focusing far more intensely on teaching skills. Well, I had to prove to myself, first of all, that that was even doable. And I kind of had to talk to the administration at the school and some of my colleagues and convince them that not only can I teach kids how to draw that don't necessarily have the talent, but it's a worthwhile endeavor. It's something we should put money and resources into because art makes the world better in the same way that music makes the world better. And so at that period, I started to really dedicate a lot of time to understanding, like, how do humans learn things? How do we learn skills? How do we learn art? How do we learn music? And that led to the revamping basically of the entire curriculum, K through 12, trying to figure out, like, what is the level of proficiency we're going for and how do we do this? And again, I stepped away from teaching much of the art history with a focus on, if you're taking my painting class, the goal is for you to be a better painter when you leave here. And that's hard to evaluate on some level. I actually developed tests because I'm a very legalistic and literal person. So I developed painting and drawing tests to do this. Over time, I realized that was kind of a mind-numbingly pointless endeavor. It did some things that were beneficial, but again, you don't really figure out new things and learn new things unless you try and fail. And of course I did fail at that, but I kept going and I kept trying to figure it out. All of this to say that for most of my life, I was stuck in a level of proficiency that was akin to where I was at about 18 years old when I graduated high school. I didn't really start developing my skills until probably 31 or 32. That's when I started to really redouble my efforts, start learning how to draw, how to think about things, how to pull images from my imagination, how to more accurately construct images. The stuff that you watch on this channel is all a product of this. Now, I've been drawing and painting for basically my whole life, but I think I can say pretty firmly that out of the 37 years I've been on this earth, I have probably only tried to get better at drawing during maybe 10 of those, maybe 7. The rest of the time has just been doing it for fun, which is great, totally fine, but I have these moments of like, oh my goodness, I could have focused my time so much better, which is pointless because dwelling on the past in that regard is only going to make me miserable. It's not a good thing. But all of that is to say that I allowed myself to be stuck because I believed the false idea that my talent had gotten me where I was, and that was as far as it was going to allow me to go. I now know that's a lie. At least that level of it was a lie, because I continue to get better. Every month, every 2 to 3 months, I can evaluate my drawings. Goodness, if you want to even just go see it in progress, you can go look at the 100 Robot series that I put up on the channel not that long ago. I started it in January and finished it, I think, in July or August. And over those months, focusing on drawing similar things, drawing almost every day, like, they improved dramatically. But not only that, they're more interesting. There's more story. There's more emotion in them, which of course is all improvement, but it's improvement that's harder to quantify. So be careful. This belief can keep you from allowing yourself to grow. It can put you in a position where you feel like, I've achieved all I can achieve. I'm just going to focus on being happy with this. Yes, you should work on being happy with where you are as an artist. It has its own benefits. Maybe it will be its own podcast at some point. But don't hamstring yourself from moving forward. Well, here's an interesting question that I want to move into next. Does talent exist? If we're talking about conflating talent and skill, should we just use skill as a word to replace talent? Maybe it's a dead word. It needs to be pulled from our vernacular. Well, I would say that is not the case. Talent exists. Of course it does. There are many people through the nature of their genes or the nurturing of their minds at an early age that have an aptitude for certain things. We see this every day, don't we? And we see it so often that it's just kind of normal. Chances are that there's something that you have a natural aptitude for, though ironically, many of us choose paths that are not aligned with our natural proclivity. I saw this every year in every class while I taught. Inevitably, there were always a few students who simply understood what I taught more quickly than the others. Students who saw things like three-dimensional forms in their mind at the drop of a hat, and even students who had more natural control of their bodies, and thusly were able to make distinct and interesting marks upon the canvases. With younger kids, this is often the case. The ones that have better fine motor skills are often better artists at first, simply because they can make the pencil do what they want on the page. Talent often presents itself in areas where success comes easily, or at least more easily than it does in other areas. If you, like me, have a natural proclivity toward math and patterns, it is likely easier for you to figure out new puzzles, understand systems, learn new algorithms, even if you haven't had any formal education in that realm. We've all seen this though. I saw it a lot in the classroom, that you would have kids come in who were just better at a certain thing. And when they were younger, it's easier to separate the ones who developed a skill from the ones who come in with natural talent. But also in older kids, older students, I sometimes say kids because I taught elementary and middle and high school, so in my brain they're all kids. It's not trying to be demeaning. Even in older students, when you expose them to something new, you could often tell the kids that had a talent in that area versus the kids that had skill. Now, if you introduce something like algebra or geometry, a particular component there, the kids with natural talent mathematically are going to wrap their head around it almost immediately, or just far, far quicker than the other students. The kids with skill, though, will often go home and practice it, and usually will end up eclipsing the talented kids pretty quickly. Not always. Sometimes if you have a talented kid who also puts in the time, or is just so crazily talented, then they'll continue to be at the top of the game. But that's pretty rare. I remember one student is coming to my mind right now who was just bizarrely exceptional. But again, it's why I focused on the 97% earlier, because that's, you can't say everyone. It just doesn't work that way. But here's the thing. Realizing that talent does in fact exist is only one part of the puzzle. Knowing that it exists allows you to understand that you may or may not have it, which is a valuable thing to be able to observe in yourself and to analyze. You may not be naturally talented at art, and someone else is. That realization might be daunting, might be unfriendly, might even cause a deep and profound sense of sadness about the nature of the universe. But that's okay. That sadness is human, and it's relevant. The reality, however, is that talent across nearly all realms seems to act as a springboard or a head start. Talent allows people graced with it to accelerate quicker or simply be ahead in a specific area. It does not, and I cannot stress this enough, it does not act as a requirement to do the thing. You do not have to have artistic talent to be an artist, to learn how to make art. You do not have to have musical talent to learn how to make music. You probably have to be able to count and hear tunes and whatnot, but maybe not. Maybe not on certain instruments. You do not need to be talented at art to make incredible and intricate work. You do not need to be talented at music to write and perform beautiful songs. What you need is hard work and practice, and patience and time, all of which are the building blocks of skill. Skill is far more important than talent. I could have started here, I suppose, but I see a lot of content out there that almost seems to deny that talent exists, that it is a real thing. Obviously, we use the profoundly lacking English language in myriad ways, and we are also prone to and justified in our own perspectives. But I cannot find a logical or experiential way to deny that talent exists. I'll use myself as an example as I feel that is fair. Then I'd like to move into a little more discussion about skill in general and the stress-reducing realizations I have come to about it. So when it comes to art, I would say that I am not naturally talented. Now, I look at my artwork and I go, yeah, I get it. I understand that because I've basically made a living looking at people's artwork and helping them get better. So I'm able to look at certain aspects, certain pieces of how a project or a piece of art is put together and ascertain what's going on behind the eyes, what's going on in that person's mind, at least to some degree. So I feel pretty comfortable and pretty confident saying that art is not a natural talent of mine. If you look at my work and you go, that's bogus, that's fine. You can think that. But I spent a lot of time making art as a kid because it was fun, because it was enjoyable. I had access pretty much to sketchbooks and to books. I played a lot of video games as a kid in my mind, but when I really go back and think about it, I was only allowed about a half an hour a day. So much of my time in my youth was either reading or drawing. My dad was in the military when I was little, and one of the first things I remember artistically is him bringing back drawings and paintings from his trips abroad in Southeast Asia. And that really spurred me on. It got me into this idea that art is a way to communicate things. And with my pretty early involvement in science fiction and fantasy, it was a tool to represent these cool things that I read about in books. So starting at probably age 6, I really started dedicating a lot of time to drawing and painting. That time is what allowed me to get decent. When I go back and look at really old drawings, and I've done some of my ancient sketchbook tours here on the channel, so you can go check them out if you want. I think my oldest sketchbook was when I was 11, maybe 12, oldest that I still have access to, of course. And the art is not good. There's not a lot in there that says like, yes, this guy will be a good artist when he gets older. And all of that is perhaps just experiential data. It's all just my experience of being a human. And the one thing that I think gives credence to it is I do have 2 other areas where I do feel like I have natural talent. And the juxtaposition in those areas is massive. And those areas would be, on one hand, math and systems, and on the other hand, music. And these are things that have just come so naturally for me over the years that I kind of just assumed that they made sense to everyone else as well. And this often happens in areas where you have talent. I didn't understand why the other kids didn't get the math. I didn't understand why people weren't organized, why they couldn't build systems that would manage things. In my professional career, I would frequently run into things in the school that were just, a mishmash of policies and procedures that had been merged together over years to make something function, which happens all the time if you've ever worked in corporate. And I would just look at them and could almost see how things needed to be fixed to make it better. And on far more than one occasion, I was just pushed to the point where I went, okay, just give me this document. Just give me the list of procedures. Oh, there isn't a list of procedures? Okay, give me a week and I'll build this and I will make it better. And that's predominantly, beside just teaching art, that's predominantly what I did at the school where I was bringing extra benefit was I built and managed systems because they make sense to me. I love math now as an adult. I did not as a kid because everyone told me it was lame, and so I chose not to like it because nobody else liked it. As I got older, I realized, hey, this is just a giant grouping of puzzles, and puzzles are fun. And so I grew to love math. In fact, I tutored 5th grade math for a while at the school. I really enjoy it. It comes very, very naturally to me, which makes me a really bad teacher at it in general because I don't understand necessarily why someone else is struggling with the particular thing they're struggling with. And I actually found this over the years as a teacher. Teachers that taught in areas that they were naturally talented in were not generally very good teachers. Because if you have a math teacher who math was always easy for, they're going to struggle to teach you math because they don't at a fundamental level understand what it's like to be bad at it, to not get it. And math came so easily for me. In fact, I remember hitting my 5th grade year and the math teacher was just like, I got nothing for you this whole year. You can draw pictures in the back of the class, which again ties into the art stuff, I suppose. And on the music front, I spent several years in high school playing in a punk and ska band and performing most weekends there for a while and wrote tons of songs. And I still perform, not particularly frequently, but I still perform. And it's just easy for me. Like, I'm not ridiculously good by any means, but It's just easy for me. Like, it makes sense. Time signatures, rhythms, patterns, keys, like, they just make sense to me on a fundamental level. And once I had kind of gotten older and engaged in those two things, I was able to really take a look at my art and look at that and go, I wish that art came as intuitively for me as playing guitar or writing a song or working with math or building a system. Like, those things come easily to me, and they're enjoyable because I'm proficient. And art is not that way, at least not for me. So if you are in a similar boat where you have tasted proficiency in something else in your life and you look at your art and you're like, I'm not talented here. Like, you might be right. You might be right, but it doesn't matter that much. It's a skill, and skills can be built. Because, oddly enough, skills are only hard work away. This might work better in written form because I have it in quotations on my script. But skills are only ever a quantity, like X quantity of work away from being developed. It's probably a lot easier to think of them in small increments in this way, and it might sound kind of dismissive if you haven't put a ridiculous amount of time into learning something, or maybe it's just coming at you a little bit sideways. But if you break down any skill into its subsequent constituent parts, each of those things has to be individually learned. If I think for a moment about the drawing that's taking place in the background, I had to learn how to take a reference and extrapolate it as opposed to just copy it, which means I had to learn how to copy it first. That's 2 skills. That allows me to get the Gharial type head at the bottom. I had to figure out how to draw the leaves from different directions, which is basically just, bisecting a plane and then figuring out how to make it look correct at different angles, which you could do by taking a piece of paper, drawing out the leaf, and then literally holding it at those angles. That's a 3rd skill, and I could go on and on. But each of those are just individual skills that I had to learn in order to be able to put this wooden dragon together. All of those skills are learnable. Though it is very difficult to decipher how long it will take to develop a skill, it is undeniably able to be developed. I can hear a gnawing voice in the back of my head, so I'll address it now. This does not mean everyone is capable of learning how to make art of the same caliber. We are not all the same, thank goodness, and we will not all be able to achieve the same things. That is simply how the universe works. However, I do believe that everyone is capable of learning the skill of drawing, the skill of coming up with ideas, the skill of painting, the skill of writing, and so on. These are all individual skills, comprised of many other micro skills, as I mentioned earlier, and they can be learned through hard work and practice. Talent helps in the acceleration at the beginning of the journey. But if you listen to any professional artists who talk about the matter, well, I have yet to hear a single one that has said that talent got them where they are, or any of their colleagues. In fact, if you listen to their stories, you often hear about a kid, like me, probably like you, who liked drawing and wasn't the best at it. Something intrinsic to the process just kept drawing us back. And we drew, and we drew, and we drew, and drew, and drew. When their friends were out playing video games, they drew. When their roommates went out drinking at parties, they painted. When their children go to sleep at night, they pull out their sketchbook and jot down creative ideas that swarmed through their head all day long. It's the time, it's the hard work that really matters. Now, that's easy to say. It is encouraging. If you've listened this far into the podcast, chances are you identify with enough pieces of what I'm saying that it's an encouraging fact to be told, whether it's true or not. And that's kind of a weird, funny thing. But I also honestly just believe that it's true. I believe that skills are able to be developed. I watched it happen for years and years and years. And I watch it happen in my own life. And honestly, in the Discord server that is attached to this channel, I watch it happen almost daily. In the last month or so, we've gotten a lot more people who've joined, which is just a joy. I get to watch people post their artwork nearly daily, and it's wonderful. And so not only am I watching my artwork improve as I dedicate time to it, but I'm watching other people's artwork improve as well. I wish that I could take, credit for that, but that's not really how this works. But it is nice to see that the more time and effort and thought that I put into the psychology of learning and whether we can learn, whether we're all doomed, those of us who were born without the natural talent, that seems to just dissipate more the older I get. I do have to say, though, that it doesn't go away entirely. And this is true for pretty much everyone in my life, though some I don't think voice it. And those would be the only ones that I'm not sure deal with it in the same capacity as creatives. There's always that gnawing voice in the back of your mind. Some of us, not me actually, some of you have gotten really good at discouraging that, of putting it back in its place, of realizing that it's irrelevant, inefficient, not helpful, and most likely false. But many of you, I assume, are like me, where you can have a really good month of working on your art, on your craft, on your writing, and then you can hit this moment where it just feels like, well, crap, what am I doing? Is all of this for naught? Is all of this pointless? What am I doing wasting so much time? So if that is you, I just want you to remember this final thing about skill. And it's the fact that skill gives hope. If we are all condemned to yield to talent, if talent is the thing that propels us forward and we need in order to be good at a particular technical skill, then we who do not have talent are doomed. I've made a decent case, I hope, that that is not the case. But it can sometimes be a difficult transition to start moving towards believing that it is something able to be developed, that skill is something you can put time into and build up. It is an easier thing to believe because it inspires hope. If you are not condemned to talent, if you are not condemned to deal with the deck that you got when you were born, if you can continue to add cards to that, if you can continue to modify it, if you can continue to grind your nose on that grindstone into oblivion and just push forward, then there is hope. Because you can continue to practice. You can continue to iron out your skills. You can continue to improve, to get better, to grow. And that is encouraging. And embedded in that is a sense of hope. And I've talked about several times on this channel that hope is so important. And I think it's incredibly important for artists in general, because so much of what we do is bring things out of the ether, out of the unconscious, into being. And in that transition, in that task, you have to hope. You have to believe that that is possible. And if you are constantly attacking your art and trying to bring things into existence, you do have some sense of belief, or at least you have the desire to believe. So take some of that encouragement, some of that energy, and try to apply it to yourself, to your growth, to your progress. Because hope is powerful. And that's what believing that skills can be developed is. It is a hope. I don't think that it's a false hope. I think every aspect of my involvement in art myself, in watching the communities that I've been a part of, in watching the Discord server, even in watching people and other creators here on this platform, I certainly believe that skills are able to be developed. And I think that there's substantial proof to that. So I hope that if you feel like you weren't born with the natural talent to do the things that you want to creatively, that this podcast serves as a sense of hope and encouragement. That even if that's true, you can still develop the skills that you want. You can still continue to hone yourself like a blade. Well, as always, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I know this conversation can sometimes be a little bit difficult. There are lots of strong opinions on the internet about most things that don't matter, but there are also strong opinions on the internet about this, about talent versus skill. I see people that take really strong stances on both sides. I tend to be more moderate in these things in that I think that there's validity to both sides, but I also do take a pretty concrete stance. Talent, I think, certainly exists, and skills can be developed independently of it. So I hope that discussion's been beneficial to you in some way. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you are still here, thank you so much for paying attention this far to the rambles of an internet man. If you want to check out the Discord, it is linked below in I was going to say the show notes. Some people say show notes in the description. Thank you to patron Who, What, Where, When for your continued support as well. And thank you to my other patrons too. If you want to check out the Patreon, there's a link to that below. It gives you access to some private videos, to the ability to vote on things as far as what content I talk about coming up, and also, primarily, just to support me in what I do here at the channel. So thank you for that. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.